we have a number of questions in. The first four questions were directed towards Charmaine on EPR and DRS. And as Charmaine isn't a panelist, she has passed me some answers, so I'm going to try and do them justice. So the first question is, will paperboard laminated drinks containers be included in DRS? And the answer is no, they won't. They will be included as packaging within EPR fees instead. The second question is there anything to stop products moving to other types, to avoid DRS, for example, so water moving to HDPE? And Charmaine has said, well, there's no evidence of that from well-established DRS systems. And even where this was the case, DRS would work hand in hand with EPR. So even those moves will still be caught under EPR packaging costs. So question 3, will there be assurances that the hospitality sector won't pass on the costs of the deposits? And Charmaine has said that this should be a closed loop system, so there shouldn't be the deposits being passed on because they will be managed by the DMO. And the final question that I will cover is the person has asked, we have a net zero carbon target. What is the carbon footprint of the DRS scheme? And Charmaine has told me that in the consultation itself, there are some estimates, and for an all-in DRS scheme between 2022 and 2023, the total carbon footprint will be 3.41 megatons of CO2 equivalent. So now this is the first question that I will be passing over to the panel, and it's somebody wanted to ask what plans will be put in place to address the shortages of packaging technologists within Northern Ireland, and I will pass over to Ron Gardner for this one.
Okay, thank you. There's basically probably 3 strands to an answer to that question, and the first strand would be education of people that are currently in the industry. So we're currently providing a level 5 diploma in packaging technology verified by Institute of Materials, Minerals and Mining to the industry at this point in time, and have done so for the last 20 years. We're about to launch a level 2 certificate in packaging, which will supplement that qualification. Over the last year, we've done an awful lot of knowledge advisory work, like technology transfer projects, which solve problems for companies, but also educate the people involved in the projects. And there's been an awful lot of good work going on in the background with the guys in my labs and chemistry, micro and packaging working together, and as well in partnership with Broma there. And that sort of relationship will continue, I have no doubt, between CAFRE and Queen's and even Chuggastown and Dublin to develop the key core competencies of people in the industry and also solve technical problems at the same time. Probably then the third strand, and probably the most important strand for CAFRE, is internal education of our students, because really the students are the future of food packaging. And we currently do run a couple of modules that are packaging based and have been successful. But there is, yes, a growing need for people that are trained, say, to the diploma level to help make decisions within companies. And pleased to announce that this week Vickerstock have very kindly offered to financially support 4 of our students when they're out on placement year to achieve the packaging diploma. So that's a great example of industry working with education to help potentially solve a shortage. And if there's anybody else in the room of 134 now that would like to help with that, please contact me after. We're always willing to take any other bursaries from companies to help support our students. And just to close, there's been an awful lot of good work done by an awful lot of people probably in the room at this point in time, the chat room, over the last year with CAFRE, and I'd say they're probably our virtual packaging team. So for example, Vickerstock, Paul Muir, but also as well the British Plastics Federation have done an awful lot of work internally with our students, as has Keep Northern Ireland Beautiful, Huhtamäki, Mintel. The list just goes on, and there's been great support externally of education provision within CAFRE. So sorry, Colin, that's quite a long answer, there's an awful lot going on and more to follow.
No, I have to say, Ron, long answers are good answers because it just shows how much is going on and how topical this is. So the next question was around recyclability of bioplastics, but Brona covered that later in her presentation. So then I'm going to skip on to the following question. So it's, if compostables are blended with fossil fuel polymers, is there a risk of microplastics being released? And I think possibly I'll pass to Brona first to see if she has any input into this one.
Yes, sure, Colin. If we're thinking about materials like the caddy bin liners that are used for collecting our organic recycling, those are fully compostable materials, and they are a blend of materials that come from biomass and a blend that comes from fossil fuel based. So there's probably a material called PBAT in there that's actually fossil fuel based, but it is compostable. So the key thing is with the compostable materials is look for those certifications on it. If it has the seedling or it has the Tough Austria symbol on it, it means that it has been tested and approved for being treated in a composting site, and that means it doesn't form microplastics, it doesn't leach anything into the compost that is negative, it breaks down as it's designed to do so. Any packaging, any thing that you see that has a compostable sign on it, just a stamp saying it's compostable, be wary. The one that I pick up most days is the coffee cup from my local shop on the way into work in the morning, and I should be advocating complete recyclability, but I still go and do it. It says on it compostable, and it has absolutely no evidence on it that it is compostable, so I put that in my bin and I'm very wary of it. So if we are using materials that are compostable and they have a seedling or a Tough Austria sign on it, that means they will not form microplastics. Any other strange blend that we come across that is a niche material that isn't designed to go into a composting stream and you don't know what it's made of, there is a lot of things that could happen with that are negative. So avoid using those materials altogether, only go for the certified ones. I think that's my opinion on how to do it safely and how to avoid any microplastics.
Okay, thank you very much, Brona. And now this next question, I don't think anybody's going to have a full answer to it, but I'm going to give everybody in the panel an opportunity to just give their thoughts on it. So the question is, do you know what percentage of green clear plastic food containers are recycled? And the second part of the question, if they were changed to cardboard with a thin film, how would that affect their recyclability, and what other effects would they have? So I think I'll start with Eric from the point of view of just maybe how much Bryson recycle and what effect moving to cardboard and film would have, and then I'll move around the room.
What was the material you described? It was clear green?
It was green or clear plastic food containers. I assume this means anything that isn't really a black plastic food container.
Yeah,
so probably
that mean those if they're clear or light green, presumably PET or polypropylene type tray, they come to us, they're good, they'll end up being recycled. I covered it in my presentation. You know, if you start laminating paper and plastic or cardboard and plastic together, then it's going to lead to problems because there's no sensible way of actually separating those out.
Okay, thanks very much. And now I'll move to Ron, who I know also has some feelings on this.
Thank you very much. I suppose for me it's a question of balance, you know, and you know, 1/3 of the foods, the food of the world is wasted, you know, so we don't want to be in a situation or scenario where we're wasting more food. We also need to look at the packs very scientifically and balance one pack against another pack as regards food waste, but also probably carbon footprint. So I could come out with a rash statement, Colin, but I'm not going to. Science in the decision has to prevail as regards the decision and the material format, and that's based around food waste, recyclability with Eric, and possibly other things like migration potentially as well. So, and carbon footprint. So it really, I would encourage everybody in the room, you know, to involve science, the likes of Eric and Brona and myself, whenever they're making a decision, and not to make a decision hastily or rashly in thinking that they're doing the right thing.
Thank you, Ron. And I'm actually going to ask Brona for her opinion next, because I know she was talking about these cardboard with film covers just before we started as well.
I think the key thing is to rewind right back to the beginning stages and have onus on the designer and simplify packaging as much as possible. We've done a great job recently of making things extremely complicated and extremely technical and bringing out the next new pack that can do this extra and that extra. And it's actually not necessary in a lot of cases. So simplify things as much as possible. If we can keep monomaterials that don't have coatings, layers, laminates and all the rest of that on it, then we give that material a much better chance of being valuable and being recyclable. So that means Eric can deal with it, or that means that somebody else can deal with it. If we start multi-layering things up, we end up with material we can't do anything with. Now, I know there are circumstances where we need to do that to protect the food, but we have to minimize the amount of that we do. So simplify things, bring it back to basics and use monomaterials, I think is my thought on it.
Thank you, Brona. And I'm going to come to Philip as well, who's maybe going to give us a few insights into even, people may feel that moving to cardboard with a plastic film makes it non-single-use plastic, but Philip's going to go in a bit more detail in the legislation and why that may not be the case.
Well, in particular at the moment, actually, that's still under discussion within Europe in the development of guidelines for the transposition of the single-use plastic directive. There's still a lot of concern about those sorts of issues, that where the threshold is between what's a single-use plastic item and what isn't. There's obviously very clear items that are obviously, a plastic cup is definitely single-use plastic, a paper cup is not, but it's, as you say, the ones with the laminates, there's a lot of discussion about that. And of course, the thing we have to be concerned about here is the impact of these items, and I think it's important probably to consider the life cycle analysis of these items. And there's various studies available. It's very easy sometimes for people to think, oh, this is better, and jump to it. And I'll give a simple example: the single-use plastic carrier bag. A lot of people switch to using paper bags, and analysis of that would show that there's a much higher use of resources to produce the paper bags. There's impacts on water use, CO2 production, etc. So you have to balance those things as well. And that, I think anybody considering switching to new material should do some research into the life cycle analysis and find out what the impact of that would be.
Thank you, Philip. Yeah, I think it's quite clear from all those answers. There's no simple answer to this, and it's consult the experts, and you're definitely looking at someone. Oh, sorry, Ron.
Sorry. Yeah, just before you move on, there's no right answer or no wrong answer. What I'm saying is to use science, and that there is an awful lot of excellent research work going on in Northern Ireland with local companies trying to solve the problem. So, full commendation to all the guys in the northern industry that are working actively on trying to reduce plastic and also find alternatives, because there is an awful lot of work, good work, to be commended.
Can I just add, Colin, that there's one example of a kind of laminated material or multi-material that we do accept in our recycling stream, and that's cartons or Tetra Pak. And if you take that example, it's a layer of certainly plastic and quite good quality fiber paper, which would be virgin, which is it's the valuable material to obtain. Yeah. So in this case, a trade industry body, ACE, actually came together and worked with the industry to establish a mill in Halifax, where they actually accept cartons and put them through a process which is able to pulp the fiber off from the plastic. Now, when I was there quite a few years ago, they didn't have an outlet for the plastic. I don't know whether that's changed or not, but certainly the fiber was a valuable product that was being used. And because that was commonly enough present within the waste stream, there was enough of it, and there was enough commonality between the different brands and the way they actually constructed their packs, that a recycling system could be set up. So, it's not an impossible thing, but the danger is that we end up with a multitude of different variations of, and this is where the industry, I think, needs to kind of really work together to say, let's keep the number of variations down to something that's manageable and can be actually dealt with down the line. And I'm hoping that the kind of extended producer responsibility setup will allow that, because effectively you guys are going to be responsible for paying the fees. And the more you work together to come up to a sensible solution and talk to us guys on the recycling end, then that'll be best for everyone.
Okay, thank you very much, Eric. Now this question is definitely for Ron. So it's from a manufacturing point of view and expectations increasing on plastics and packaging. What is CAFRE's plans to increase the key core skills of packaging expertise in Northern Ireland?
Okay, I've sort of already covered that, Colin, as regards the packaging diploma that we currently deliver and will continue to deliver. So we educate about 12 people every year at quite a high level in that. With the partnership with Fickerstock, we're planning to roll that out to our own students, so that'll take us from 12 through to about 16. We've also delivered, are starting to deliver a level 2 program in packaging, which is at a lower level. So for example, at the minute I'm delivering to a company to 15 people within that company, and it's bespoke to their needs. And as well, technology transfer projects. So for example, over the last year, the lab back in Lockery, Tony Duffy, Alex Henry, the volume there has doubled in technology transfer projects. And I see that increasing even further over this year. I'm working in close partnership with Brona and Dr. Shivani down in Chuggas, really to support industry and transfer our knowledge to them.
Okay, thank you very much, Ron. And now the next questions were a specific ask, and I thought, we always like to help out students, so we'll see what we can do here. So somebody says that they've begun a PhD at Queen's that is focused around recycling, particularly plastics, and they're wondering if it would be possible to access more detailed information regarding recycling outputs and end use, lists of contractors and what they do with recyclate, methodology for weight-based measurements taking place to calculate the percentages shown, etc. And I suppose firstly I would direct you to the department's waste data flow, which gives some general information on recycling. But just I suppose to ask maybe Eric first, what sort of information is out there that he's aware of?
Well, you've named the one. Colin. Look, I think if you put the student in contact with us, we'll see what we can do to help from our end.
Okay, and probably this one's probably less so for Ron and Brona because it's more around figures. So yeah, if you look up waste data flow, and also if you get in contact with the organisers afterwards, then Eric's, I have to say, is always very helpful. So you're definitely on a good footing there. So now for the next question, and the question is just asking for the panelists' opinion on the inevitable significant increase in costs of food products at endpoint. I assume this is out of EPR, and whether this will increase food poverty levels. Now, just from my point of view, my understanding is packaging is a relatively small part of the overall cost of food. So I don't think it would be an inevitable significant increase in costs, but perhaps I'll go to Ron first on this one.
I don't see, well, the cost will have to be passed on somewhere, obviously as regards EPR. So maybe the retailer will have to bear some of it, and maybe the consumer as well. The DRS, the cost for that, I actually welcome that, because anytime I go for a walk, it saddens me to see the amount of litter on our streets and shores. So if you're to add 20p to a pack and the person is to get that money back when they return the pack to a recycling bin centre or whatever, then I would welcome that, and I don't actually see that as a negative.
Okay, thanks, Ron. Yeah, and I suppose I should just add, it's not as though we're not all paying these costs already, because the costs are going through your rates at the minute for waste collection, waste treatment, street cleansing, etc. So it's just putting the cost somewhere else so that the producer has to pay some of them, and so that the consumer realizes the damaging impact of not treating some of this packaging properly has.
Totally agree. Yeah.
And
It's all down to litter, Colin, really. You know, that's what's in the public eye, you know, is plastics in the sea, plastics on the land, and really as consumers ultimately are to blame for that. And hence that's why I say I definitely welcome the DRS. And
yeah, and I think I'll just put Philip in here too, because I know he's a lot of experience in all these areas, like the damages of marine litter, etc. So maybe he wants to say a few things.
Yeah, well, I think you hit the nail on the head there, Colin, when you said that the money just isn't created to get rid of this litter. You know, we're already paying for it. We're just paying for it through a different way. So this is going to refocus it. And I pick up what you're saying there, Ron, about, well, it's down to consumers. I'm not so sure that I would necessarily point the finger wholly at consumers. The producers have been getting away with, for want of a better term, with the packaging costs, a lot of it being, or the disposal of the packing costs being passed on to the consumers, either through the rates, council collections, etc., and to government. This will push it a little bit back up the chain and will cause them to focus a little bit more on that. So they may take a bit more interest in messaging, designing their packages better, and actually being more involved in the collection of those packages at the end of their life, that they may find more efficient ways of dealing with it, disposing of it, rather than just, if you like, washing their hands of it once it goes on a supermarket shelf. So I would hope that the EPR refocus will help actually drive big changes in littering.
Okay, thank you, Philip. And now here's the next question is, and Charmaine has thankfully provided an answer to me. So it's, how will DRS in Northern Ireland interoperate with other schemes operating Republic of Ireland, Scotland, etc.? And will it require producers to make Northern Ireland only SKUs, which I have no idea what that means, but and will it, will there be any fraudulent movements of containers? So Charmaine has said that they're working across UK nations to bring in legislation to safeguard against potential fraud. Labelling will be a key protection against fraud, and safeguards will be developed before implementation. And I think possibly Ron would like to say a bit more about the movements in labelling at the minute, because I know I've seen some great movements in what they're doing in labelling at CAFRE.
yeah, there's well, an awful lot of good work going on across the industry, Colin, you know, in design and in labelling. And I've no doubt that Northern Ireland definitely is driving things forward. As well, CAFRE and Loughrea in particular are now sitting on the packaging forum in NIFTA with Michael Bell, which is a great opportunity as well, because it's allowing us to sit and work with local manufacturers and help bring back their views and opinions, and also help implement change. So we're in a very, very good place.
Okay, thank you, Ron. So this is just more of a general comment. Somebody says it feels there needs to be more engagement with younger people in the industry to get them excited about packaging. And I have to say, actually, I'm surprised at just how excited people have been getting about packaging and DRS. The DRS had over 30,000 responses to the Northern Ireland consultation. Whenever you think the normal consultation levels are in the hundreds, there's definitely an excitement around this.
Yeah.
So now to the next question. Why do we think industry allowed people to move to paper laminate trays and greenwash the message when PET is clearly more recyclable and more sustainable? How can we stop knee-jerk reactions? And I'm not sure who would want to start on this one.
Well, that's back to the consumer and back to consumer opinion, and then the retailer is undoubtedly has driven that change. I suppose Iceland was the first one that came on board and said they were going to be plastic free. And yeah, I said it earlier on. I'm not saying plastic is good or bad, or a laminate is good or bad. It really depends upon what is the most fit for purpose. You know, what will protect the product at the best optimum price, and minimize effect on the environment. You know, those three things are key. So, you know, I wouldn't dare sit here and say one thing is better than another without having information to make that choice.
Thanks, Ron. And I know, Philip, you'll have something to say about the necessary areas where plastic is as well. So over to you next.
Yeah, well, I mean, plastic, it starts really with the design. There are an awful lot of plastic products that they need, the producers or developers of these plastics need to think where they're going to go at the end of their life, because basically that's what we're talking about. What happens to these once they're put out there onto supermarket shelves or in customers' hands? You know, what happens? Where do they go? So they need to think about all stages of its life. And improve the design. And Brona's already touched on saying mono-materials and trying to reduce the number of materials, and Eric, I think, has supported that as well.
Yeah.
Trying to avoid multi-material packaging. Then the use, what's going to happen to it during its life. If it's going to be reused, refilled, etc. We want to encourage as much as that. And then when we get to the final stage, disposal, how do we dispose of it correctly? We focus an awful lot, I think, on the disposal, a little bit more on recycle and reuse now, but we haven't really been focusing on the design. We need to think of all three stages, and hopefully a lot of these drives, a lot of change happening, EPR, DRS, the Single-Use Plastic Directive, hopefully that will drive a lot of these changes, and a lot to think about. And one thing, of course, to mention is the UK Plastics Pact. I did see a question in the chat about films and recyclability of films and so on. I know the UK Plastic Pact members are really looking at addressing that, and they've targets to work on that at the moment. So, you know, things like the UK Plastics Pact, working with the industry as well, will also help drive these things forward. And lastly, I'll mention then there's the UK plastics tax as well, the plastic packaging tax that's coming in next year. Again, hopefully that will be a driver for change. So there's a lot of drivers out there, and it's great to see that happening, because I think there's a lot of public support for change and our protection of our future.
Thank you, Philip. And you've
pop in there, Colin, sorry, and mention that I think one of the knee-jerk reactions that has happened because of all the media exposure around plastics is that people think plastics and therefore packaging are bad, and we've a job to do to, you know, remind people that packaging is a brilliant thing, and it actually creates a safe environment for our food, protects it, reduces food spoilage and all the rest of it. So I think one of the big things we all have to do is remind people of that. But Ron and myself engage with companies throughout Northern Ireland on a daily basis, and we're there and ready to, you know, help you with the decisions that you're wanting to make around your packaging. You know, reach out, ask us, and we can help you make choices if necessary that you're unsure of what to do, and we can also help you justify back as to why the choices you've made are good and are good for the environment, good for the packaging. So producers aren't alone. You know, we're there to support you in doing that, and we're, you know, we're ready to help with that.
Yeah.
Thanks, Brona. And I'm just going to do a couple of quick fire questions before we wrap up. So the next one, Philip has mostly covered about new emerging options to get film recyclability or recycled content higher. So Philip's mentioned some of the legislative drivers, and I just also wanted to mention, you know, we are engaging with a whole lot of companies looking at chemical recycling, autoclaving to recycle plastics, and Queen's had a presentation earlier this week on one they're looking for to not only recycle waste plastic but to upcycle it into carbon nanotubes, which is a very exciting thing. So yes, there is lots going on. The next question is, with more and more work required for technical information from plastic performance, is Loughrea in a position to support this with technical expertise? And I suppose that's to Ron.
Thank you very much, Colin. Well, hopefully Bruno will back me up. I would say we technical expertise and Kitwise, we are very well equipped, and we've identified some areas that we will invest in this coming year. One will be permeability, because with changes in materials, permeability, oxygen, water vapor, highly important to the shelf life of the product. We're also looking at optical clarity and light transmission, because again, if we're moving into more recycled materials, that will affect the clarity of the material and then the consumer's ability and perception of that material. The other big one would be food migration, and Bruno and myself have talked about migration and migration testing. There's nowhere on the island of Ireland that actually does migration testing, and most of that work has to go to the UK. it's not a field of expertise that Brona would feel comfortable with, or I would feel comfortable with, but we are working in partnership with Teagasc in Dublin, and they're going to take the lead on that, and I have every hope that Teagasc will take that on board. So between CAFRE and Queen's and Teagasc, I believe that the three organisations have the technical ability to meet the requirements going forward. So it's working in partnership, Colin. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, and another quick question. So, Brona, are drop-in plastics currently being produced in UK or Europe?
I don't know that I necessarily have all the up-to-date manufacturers in my head, but perhaps it started maybe with polyethylenes in Brazil with Braskem, and I know there are European manufacturers, but I don't quote me on this, but I don't think UK there are any manufacturers. I think it's mainly the Americas and Europe.
Okay.
But there's plenty of them out there. If anybody wants to get in touch with me about it afterwards, send me a message and I can send you some information about who the suppliers might be.
Thank you, Brona. And now I'm going to ask Eric, I don't know if you'll know the answer to this one, but what is the best way to recycle metal caps, for example, beer bottles or the threaded closures of jars?
Well, I know that there was a campaign by Alupro on the aluminium lids to keep your hat on and basically screw the lid back on again. For me, if you're a real recycling geek, I actually drop my beer tops and jam jars into a steel food can and close it down, being very careful not to hurt yourself in the process. So yeah, but I guess put the lid back on where possible, and if you're really keen, be careful, but do what I do.
Okay, thank you, Eric. And I think we will just take one more question. So how do we convey the complexity of food packaging to the consumer while keeping a simple message to engage them in behavior change? So it's, I suppose, really the question there is, how are we engaging the consumer on all sorts of things to do with food packaging? From my point of view, we are working with WRAP to ensure people understand what packaging is recyclable, and working with all sorts of the industry on the UK Plastic Pact. So maybe I'll go to Philip first to talk a bit more about that.
Okay, yeah, it's a very good question, because I get asked lots of questions all the time by family and friends. Can this be recycled? Can that be recycled? What should I do with this? I mean, that's the classic one. I actually think we need to keep the complexity away from consumers. I think we need to just make it simple and have very simple messaging for people. You can recycle this, you can't recycle that. This is how you should dispose of an item. We need to have the messages very direct like that. I mean, I'm happy enough to work with what the different polymers are and what all the numbers for recycling plastics are, etc. I mean, I enjoy that, but most consumers just want a very simple, can I do it, can I not do it, where should I put it at the end of its life?
Thank you, Philip. And I'll just ask Eric to put in something maybe on this, who is constantly working to try and get people to recycle better.
Yeah, well, I think Philip's right in terms of the messages have to be really simple. And I think there is a growing concern out there about the environment, about the impact of packaging on the environment. And I would just urge, this issue of kind of knee-jerk reactions, which leads to confusion and disillusion really with people. I have a lot of sympathy for companies who can see that there's a huge public reaction to something, and the danger is that they'll want to be the first to get a name for kind of being the first to kind of react and look responsible. To me, the wise thing when we don't really know what the answers are is to pause, take time with the industry, work collectively together to come up with answers, and come back with a uniform, consistent response to these types of things. And personally, I'd have much more respect for companies who do that than jump to something which then potentially just adds to confusion and disillusion.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Eric. And I think it's time really to draw this to a close. There were just a couple of questions we didn't get time to answer, but I think we may discuss those and possibly put out some answers along with the recording of this. So just want to say thanks to all the panelists for coming, thanks to all the speakers, and thank you to the organisers. And of course, thank you to everybody for coming, asking questions and participating. And we hope to see you at another one of these again very soon. Not to put Ron under too much pressure for another organising one, but I'd like to see another one. So thanks
Cheers.
everyone.
Okay, thank you. Yeah,
Thank
thanks
you.
everybody for coming. And
Thank
thanks
you.
for the-
Bye all. Thanks.
Cheers. Bye now.
Bye bye.